I'm living proof that you can go from heartbreak to healing to total transformation. My divorce in 2020 led me to meditation and to the understanding that your greatest transformation begins with one thing: understanding yourself. Not just your human self, your divine self too. Because when you live only from the human lens, life feels like an obstacle course. But when you align with the divine in you, life becomes a colorful path, guided, adventurous, and deeply aligned. I'm Charu, and this podcast is your invitation to begin that journey. So let's begin. What if your burnout, your heartbreak, your restlessness was actually a doorway? Not a failure, but an invitation to pause, listen, and remember who you are beneath all the noise. In today's episode, I sit down with Barron Hanson, VEDIC meditation teacher, filmmaker, and the founder of Australia Nowra. From building a high-powered company in New York to returning to his small hometown in Australia, Barron's journey is one of surrender, alignment, and answering the quiet pull of the soul. We talk about what it means to follow charm, your intuition, and the real and sometimes messy process of letting go of a life that looks good on paper, and how deep rest through meditation can change not only your life, but your entire community. Barron also shares stories from his project teaching meditation in Nowra in New South Wales, Australia, including his documentary work with everyday people and his collaboration with teachers bringing meditation into prisons. This episode is an invitation to trust your timing, to say yes to the unknown, and to remember that evolution is already happening within you. So let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Your Colorful Path with Charu. I have a really special guest today, somebody who I had met at a VEDIC meditation retreat that was led by our common teacher, Thom Knowles. When I met Barron Hanson in Rishikesh in 2024, I had made a mental note to know his story because I found it very interesting that somebody from Australia who has lived in New York got into Vedic meditation and was with me at the retreat in Rishikesh and now is a Vedic meditation teacher. So there are many facets to your story, Barron, that I haven't even introduced yet in the introduction. But first of all, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Glad to be here all the way from Australia.
Yeah, and pretty early on, huh?
Yeah, it's early in the morning, so excuse my droopy eyes, but I'm glad we could make it work with the time zones.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I want to know the arc of your story, because just to give my listeners an idea why this is so interesting is that you've lived in New York, you learned meditation, you moved back to Nowra, which is in New South Wales in Australia. You became a Vedic meditation teacher. You started a whole community of meditators, which is now a pretty big and impactful initiative in Nowra. And your most recent foray into teaching meditation to people in prisons. So take us through your journey, how you started, what happened on the way, and how are you doing now?
Yeah, so I guess to give people a little bit of context, I grew up in a rural town in Australia, population about 30,000. Beautiful town, idyllic nature, but as is similar in America, a lot of these regional towns, they face a lot of social issues, lower socioeconomic status, drug abuse, violence, and not a lot of opportunity. And so it's the nature of these towns is that anyone who's bright or young who wants to go to university will generally leave town, leaving this kind of vacuum behind, right? And when I was growing up and I was a teenager, I had a really negative perception of my hometown. I thought it was a bit of a shithole. And as soon as I could, I got out. As soon as I was 18, I got a car, I got a job, I left town, I went traveling, I traveled around the world. I came back and I never even went home. I went to university. I lived in Sydney for a little bit. And then in 2014, I moved to New York City. But the theme here is that I was always chasing something more, like chasing, like going traveling and then going to university and then moving to Sydney. And it just wasn't really, I guess, like there was nowhere that I could be happy. I was like, I'll be happy when I get to here. I'll be happy when I get to here. I'll be happy when I get to New York. And, part of my drive or the motivation to move to New York was very ego driven. I want to create this big company. I want to be really wealthy. I want to be really popular. And so I started a company in New York, a creative studio called Convicts, with 3 other Australians. We were creating documentary films, short films, and we made, over the course of 7 years, about 250 short films about interesting people. So just like you do on your podcast, where you find people who you want to meet and talk to and find their story and pull out their story, we were doing that on film, short films. And so It was a great life. We had a lot of success. We built a company just before the pandemic. We had 14 full-time employees. So we were growing. We were doing all the things. We were getting investors. We were doing the startup hustle. But during that time, my lifestyle was very unsustainable. I was drinking a lot of alcohol, as you do in New York City. I was staying up late a lot, seeing a lot of sunrises, working really hard and running ultra marathons as well. So, I was really like burning the candle at all 3 ends of a 2-ended candle. And it was just unsustainable. And so that kind of is where the meditation came into my life, I guess, in that period.
Is that how you met Thom G?
Yes. So funnily enough, when I first learnt Vedic meditation, I was inspired by my business partner. He had learnt Vedic meditation when he was at Berkeley, and he had done it when he was at university. And one day, and this was a build up to lots of things, but he found me sleeping under my desk at work because I was hungover. And he kind of like came and like gently nudged me and kicked me and said, hey, mate, like, you should try this. You should try Vedic meditation. You should try it. And so I did zero research. I didn't know who Thom was. I didn't know what Vedic meditation was. I literally went Vedic meditation near me, Google, went to the person, didn't go to an intro talk, paid the money, signed up, did the course, witnessed the puja ceremony, thought it was very strange, learnt the practice, and I basically did it for about 3 years without ever going to an event, without ever knowing that the Vedic meditation community existed, without ever going to a group meditation. I was just like, it was awesome. It was like, it worked really well for me, but I had no interest in being part of any meditation community. I just like took the practice and used it without any of the other knowledge that comes along with the practice.
Wow, that's fascinating because that's fascinating that you just like deep dived. I love that you did not do any research. So there was no like the brain getting involved. You got in. And I'm so curious to know, do you remember your first ever meditation?
I remember the first meditation with the puja ceremony being like very strange because I didn't go to an intro talk, so I hadn't had it explained to me. But I do remember in my 4-day course that I was experiencing a lot of fatigue, and so I kept falling asleep inside of the course. So when the teacher was talking, I was like literally falling asleep. I was holding a glass of water because I didn't want to I was trying to keep myself awake, and so I'd find myself like nodding off, and that was a really good indication that I was suffering from a lot of fatigue. And I noticed that in my students now. It's funny when they're in the course, in the 4-day course, and I can see them nodding off. I'm like, yeah, you're gonna like this one. You're gonna like this practice because it's so deeply restful, And it was the rest that I was deeply craving, that I was in need of, and so that was really nice to when I finally felt that. And I hadn't rested in so long living in New York. As you know, you've lived there. It's like the city that never sleeps. And that was me. I was quite literally the guy who was never sleeping. So I do remember being really, really tired and feeling really sleepy in the first 4 days of meditation.
Wow. And so the first 3 years when you did it, what was the shift? Was there a clear shift? Like, what I want to know what happened. What was your experience with those? In fact, 3 years is a lot. Maybe talk to us first about the first 6 months. Like, did you feel something drastically shift? Was it slow? How was it?
Yeah. So my teacher, Robert Hammond in New York City, he's actually the co-founder of the High Line. Lovely guy. But he
Oh, wow.
challenged me. Yeah, he challenged me to do, I think it was 30 days, 30-day challenge. So it's like, you've committed to doing this 4-day course. You've paid this money. Why don't you just try it for 30 days and make it non-negotiable? Make it twice a day, 20 minutes. And I did that. I'm very personally motivated by challenges. I got this app called Insight Timer, and it keeps track of your streaks. And I got to 30 days. I'm like, I could probably get to 100 days. Well, I could probably get to a year, and I could probably get to 600. I think I got to 1,000 days or something like that in a row of doing it every single day, at least once a day. And it wasn't anything profound that I noticed, but other people started to notice. My parents who lived in Australia, they could tell something was different, on the phone. My colleagues were like, you've changed. And I started to drink a little bit less. I was drinking a lot of alcohol when I was living in New York. And so I started to just drink a little bit less and have more days of sobriety. And so it definitely wasn't a fast change, although I felt the effects immediately. But I think over time what happened is I just started to become more myself. I started to be more me and less of like this character that I was trying to be in New York. I just started to come back just more to this kind of authentic self that I had been missing or had forgotten.
Beautiful. Could you speak a little bit more to that? Because I think that's a really, really important moment of recognition of your authentic self. And can you now, looking back, articulate what was the difference between the Barron that was going, achieving, overcoming in New York and being a certain way versus finding a spiritual practice that really worked and then you feeling like there is a shift? Like, can you articulate it now, what that internal shift was?
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to observe in hindsight than when you're going through it because it's a slow incremental process. But for me, I guess and I've noticed this in my students a lot as well now as a teacher, is that when when we all start becoming a child, we go off to school or we start learning lessons, that we start to get imprinted with ways of being, right? And whether our upbringing or our social, whatever is so socially surrounding us, we start to have this idea of how we should be, and we kind of forget who we are. I think children are very good at this. And then as we grow up, as life gets in the way, we just start to accumulate stress, right? We experience different things and we think that we need to be a certain way or have a certain job or look a certain way. And so most of my 20s was really kind of trying to be like this person I thought I needed to be. Rich, successful, on social media, showing that I had this really great life. And I think around the age of 30, so I'd been meditating for maybe for 4 years at that point, I started to really realize, have a true recognition of who I was and kind of be unapologetically honest about that, starting to just kind of lean more into that. And I really think it was because of the daily incremental going deep inside in meditation. And what happens in meditation, and you would have experienced this too, is that when we meditate, we go beyond our thoughts, we go beyond our individual identity and our individual ego structure, and we get to experience what we like to call capital T true self. What are we like, us without the thoughts? What are we at the core of our existence? And it wasn't like I had some epiphany one day of this. It was just the daily incremental experience of that each day I started to move more and more towards that core true self, and all the layers of stress that I'd added on in my 20s just started to peel away. And I just less and less like became like tried to be something I wasn't, and I just led more into like who I was at the core. And so it was like a slow evolution, but I just started having more confidence in that and lean more into it. And it started to show up in all areas of my life, how I would relate to people, how I would show up on social media, where I choose to spend my time when I was doing for work. And so there was the evolution of self, but also the everything else that came with that as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that's an important point that I would love to reiterate for our audience, that the sometimes I feel that even with my friends or people that I talk to, their expectation with meditation, even with my family, is sometimes like, oh, but it didn't do anything. And I'm like, it did. You just can't see it yet. And it is not a magical wand that gives you something like right there. It actually is something that just builds over time. And one day you look back and you're like, oh, wow, like that was, how did I do that? Or, for me, this really impacted my own path because I also just got into meditation on a whim. Like, divorce happened, everything fell apart, and I just couldn't rely on the usual systems. And I was getting therapy, I was doing many other things to support myself, but they didn't seem to go deep. And this time I felt like I needed something really deep because I was asking existential questions of like, what am I? Why am I so upset at the fall of this marriage? And it felt like it was not a question of what the marriage was. The question was, who am I? What am I here for? Why did this happen to me? And to answer those questions, I got into meditation. And then over the course of the last 5 years, Barron, my life has completely changed. Can I see that in hindsight? Absolutely. Could I see it when I was living those days? Absolutely not. But like you, it's interesting. Everyone around me, even when I was in the pit of that heartbreak, everyone around me could notice. They were like, wow, this is really difficult because of my personal situation, and yet you're doing really well. What are you doing? And I said, well, I got into meditation. They were like, you better keep doing that because we see it. And that's what happened to you. People outside of you noticed because you sometimes can't notice the progress you're making.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say the analogy is kind of like if you go into the gym, and then you haven't seen your grandma in a while, and you go around and visit her, and she's like, "Oh, look how big your muscles are." Like it's that kind of thing. It's like we don't notice because it's just daily incremental growth. And I think the other thing is that so many people in the Western world are looking for a quick fix. They're looking for the magic pill, the thing that can just do that, like just fix me. I just want to be better. And we know that what's happened is the way that we've ended up here wasn't quick either. It's kind of like it's slowly daily incremental stress, adding, and we get to a point, and this is what I see in a lot of students, just like you, that had some sort of inciting incident, some sort of thing that has shine light on realization that they need to make some change. And so, that's what I see so much, is that people get to a breaking point and they get to a point where they go, hey, this is unsustainable. And that was my experience. And then they start to realize that, okay, the only way I'm going to get out of this is the same way that I got into it, which is just slow, incremental, daily practice.
Yeah. And the result is also what you said, is that alignment with your true self, because we're not, I guess in a different universe, if we were taught how to meditate since we were kids, like maybe a minute a day or something, maybe we would be more aligned with our true self and just always know what our true self was. But in this universe, that's not a reality yet. So I think it's really difficult to even know that you have a true self, that there is a higher self. And when you meditate, I do believe that once you experience that there is something that is outside of you, that feels outside of you, it is not outside of you at all, but it feels like it is outside of this system that we think of as us. And once you experience it, you feel like in your head there is an anchor now of like, what was that I experienced? And I always tell people, once you experience that, you can never go back to being the person who had not meditated, because now you've tasted it. You may not do it as regularly as you like, but it's always there. It's the anchor of there is something that is deeper, like, right?
Yeah, totally. And we say it's like doing research, right? It's like we might research one way and research another way, and when you find this way, it's kind of like I wouldn't not ever meditate. I wouldn't ever, like, you can pay $1 million to stop meditating. You know, it's that has that much profound effect, or it's made that much change in my life. And so, yeah, I find that I do come across a lot of people who are skeptics, right? They're like, you know, it won't work for me, or I can't meditate, or, you know, like it's too hippie for me or whatever. But, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to is I'm working on a documentary. I'm fast forwarding a little bit here, but I'm working on a documentary in my hometown, and I'm really capturing these individual characters. So these people who you wouldn't expect to meditate. So people who have, you know, the everyday people, folk from Nowra, right? And we've captured what their life is like before meditation. Yeah. And they're all suffering in different ways. And then we taught them to meditate. And now we've been kind of following their journey to see their own personal evolution. So, you know, seeing how that shows up on film, seeing how that shows up in their lives and in their kind of relationships and their jobs and this kind of thing. So, you know, I think that, like, one of the things I'm trying to convey with this film is that anyone can do this practice. You don't need to be someone who's been through a divorce, or someone who has a drinking problem, or, you know, someone who is spiritual. What this practice is actually about is about deep rest. And we were just talking before about, you know, the importance of deep rest, and everybody can rest more. You know, I think that, like, the rest is the basis of all action. You know, give me an action that someone's done, and every single time they've rested before they did that. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
And no one has just done anything before they've rested. And I think, like, we sometimes forget that. And living in places like New York and San Francisco, there's a lot of, like, pressure to do. And the reality is that, well, first, before we do, we have to rest. And so, if there is anyone out there who's kind of thinking, well, I don't know if meditation is for me, it's like, well, how do you feel about having a really good sleep? How do you feel after you have an amazing, proper 8-hour sleep and you wake up feeling rested? Imagine doing that 20 minutes twice a day, every single day of your life. That's kind of what the meditation does at the base level, at the intro level.
Yeah, at the minimum, you'll get that. And that is, in our world, I think, with all the stuff that we're all dealing with, sleep is a good quality sleep, and rest is highly valued. I mean, look at the amount of money and resources we all spend on being able to make that happen. And sometimes it's not possible, or it's not that high quality. So that's a great way to think about it. I do love that. And I absolutely 100% agree, being a Vedic meditator myself, that rest is unmatched. It really is. But going to something that you said before, are you able to share any story of somebody who would not usually meditate from this project that you have going on, and that they tried? And was it difficult to get any of these people to meditate, or were they looking for it and so kind of were like, I'll just try it?
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of context, I guess. So 2020, I was still in New York City during the pandemic, and we ended up making a feature-length documentary with Mount Sinai Hospital. So we spent 60 days inside of the hospital during the peak of the pandemic, shooting the stories of the first responders. So that was our first feature-length documentary. But also, that time in New York City, it really made me realize that I no longer wanted to be there. And so I had already had the thought to become a meditation teacher, and I thought, I'm going to do this in New York. I'm going to teach on the weekends, and it's going to be like a side thing, and I'm going to keep making films. But during the pandemic, I was really it was a challenging time for my hometown. just before the pandemic, there was this really severe bushfires. So 2019, 2020, our town was kind of the last frontier, or where a huge fire front basically reached. And our house was meant to burn down on January 4th, 2020. So I kind of came home. The idea was to help clean up after the house was gone. On the day that I flew home, that wind changed direction and our house was saved. And so
wow,
I came home and I realized that there was a huge amount of stress in our town. That those fires had just caused a massive shift and change, and it was very scary for a lot of people. And an already struggling town with, on top of that, with hundreds of people losing their homes, it was a really kind of like harrowing time. And so this was a catalyst event for me to say, hey, I don't think I want to be in New York City anymore. And it was kind of like, maybe instead of being a Vedic meditation teacher in New York, I can be a Vedic meditation teacher in Nowra. Big difference. 9 million people versus 30,000 people.
Huge.
A lot smaller of a pool to find students. But
yes.
But being a filmmaker, I was like, wow, what if I could film this process? What if I could help Nowra change? What if I could teach 1% of Nowra to meditate and see whether that makes any kind of effect or catalyst or change within the greater population? And it might take me 10 years, but I'm just going to start filming. And so after getting through the pandemic, getting through teacher training with Tom G, and then ending up back in Nowra, that was 2022 when I returned, we started rolling on this film. And one of the first things I did is I did like a casting call. So basically put the word out. I got on the local radios. I advertised on Facebook. I put up signs, and I said, I'm making a documentary. I'm looking for characters who want to learn to meditate. And, that was it. And I had about maybe 60 people apply to be in the film, which was really cool. That these people had put their hand up and said, hey, I want to learn to meditate, but I also am down to be filmed. And so, this was really exciting to meet these people, but it meant that we got to choose from a really diverse and broad range of people. And so each of the characters in the film, we're down to 8. We chose 8. They all have different reasons why they want to learn to meditate. And then we followed their stories.
And what were they?
To know them. So we have
what were the reasons?
Yeah, so we have Molly. She is young and she was suffering from a lot of anxiety, so crippling anxiety. She could hardly leave the house. We had Jamie, who was a recovering alcoholic. We had Murph. He is my Year 9 science teacher who's now retired and looking to move into the next stage of his life. We have Jess. She's the busy businesswoman, doing 1,000 things at once. We have Mon, who was pregnant at the time. We have Joey, who is a social worker and a musician. We have Sian, who is a performer. And we have Mel, who was in recovery from cancer. So, this broad range of people who are all looking to make some change in their life. And so what's been really cool is all 8 of them have had massive changes in their life in the last 3 years, and all 8 of them have had profound experiences through the meditation. And so, it's been really cool. And my favorite of them is probably Molly. When we first interviewed her, even the thought of us coming into her home with a camera basically sent her into a panic attack. She couldn't have us in the house. She had to have family there, but she was determined because her sister had learnt to meditate. So she'd seen the change in her sister, and she had so much anxiety that she couldn't leave the house without being with someone. Even just going to the supermarket was a huge thing for her. And over the last kind of 2 years, which we've been following her, we've seen her flourish. She comes to group meds now. She goes to yoga at our studio. She's able to go, and she's like, this is really embarrassing, but I took a selfie of myself for the first time in 10 years. She was confident enough to take her photo of herself, and so these little things where it's like, it's anecdotal, but it's so beautiful just to see people's transformation on film. And it's really powerful because these people are really authentic. You know, they're not people in New York or San Francisco like I was, like trying to be something they're not. They're actually just being themselves, and they're transforming through this practice. So it's been so heartwarming, and it's been like the coolest experience to follow these people along their journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm actually really curious. Do you think that there is a difference between, well, there is a difference, but I want to know from your teaching experience, do you think there is something that is slightly different about people who actually give meditation a shot versus those that don't want to try it at all?
It's interesting. When I returned to Nowra, my goal was to teach 1% of Nowra to meditate. And I think I have a very realistic view is that 99% of people aren't going to pick up this practice. And that's okay. I think I think it's like that is just the nature of this. It's like everybody's on their own path of evolution, and everybody has lessons to learn in their life, and everybody has their own journey to go on. And the cool thing about this 1% goal is that it's allowed me to not be too worried about anyone who doesn't want to learn to meditate. It's given me a little bit of I'm not trying to reach everyone. If I go and do a talk to 100 school teachers, if one person signs up, that's a win. I've reached that 1%. And so I think having a lot of compassion for someone who is on their journey, and knowing that everybody's doing their own research, and knowing that this practice isn't for everyone as well. There's a lot of people out there who just can't sit still for 20 minutes, or might have another practice that brings them peace. And so having that 1% goal has allowed me to really focus on who's the one person in the room. Who's that one person who genuinely will benefit and can really kind of learn from this practice. And so I think for me, just having that kind of mindset has really allowed me to focus on the ones who are keen for it versus the ones who I know will just never learn. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think I've created my own system in which I'm focusing on the people who are most curious and interested, and not bewildering the ones who just aren't ready today.
Yeah, I think that settles it, because, we kind of follow whoever asks, I guess, the most meaningful questions about the practice. I do believe that you should not give too much information to someone who is not interested in that information. It's a disservice to them as well as a disservice to the information. But if anyone is wanting to meditate and wants to try it and is curious, but feels that they're special and they will not be able to meditate, is there something that you can say or you can share from maybe a student story of somebody who believed that I just cannot do it, and then they did it and they got it?
Yeah. I've had really funny situations where people have come to an intro talk and then I've never seen them again. And then 2 years later, they arrive on the doorstep ready to learn meditation. And I think that everybody is doing research, right? Everybody is just doing their own research. And what I say to people is that if you don't want anything in your life to change, don't come and do meditation. If you're happy with how your life is going right now and everything is great, then do not come and learn meditation, because ultimately meditation will cause changes in your life. And for some people, this is the way, but they continue to do the research, and this was my experience too in New York. It was I did lots of research. I tried different modalities. I tried breath work. I tried psychedelic drugs. I tried, going on retreats and all these ice baths, and I ran 5 ultra marathons, but I was never happier. I was always chasing, I was always chasing. And so I think that people will always come at the right time. And I think that's probably my biggest thing, is that I just like to say that, when the time is right, the time is right. And I've even noticed this in my course, is that like those people who, that person who didn't come for 2 years, that, went to an intro talk and came 2 years later, they admitted, they're like, I'm really glad I didn't learn 2 years ago because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to make the commitment. Yeah. I wasn't ready to really do it. I had to wait until things got bad enough in my life that I was choiceless but to do this.
Yes. I love that. I love that level of honesty, because I am like that. I definitely had many chances to try meditation before, but life was tagging along, right? Some things were working, some were not working, but it was okay. It was manageable. I could still surf the wave. But when it went down for me, and then it was like, oh, there's nothing left. Like, your surfboard is gone. You're under the ocean and you're drowning. I think that for me, for the type of personality I am, that really worked. I was like, okay, Divine, I see you. You're really smart and you know me. Yeah.
Nature is highly intelligent, and if we're living an unsustainable lifestyle, it will continue to turn up the temperature. It will continue to turn up the intensity until we can't ignore the area of change that we need to make. And that's the beauty of this. Like, we're all on an evolutionary path. In the Vedic philosophy, we say there is only one thing happening, and that is evolution. And, we can either try and hold on to, what we think or the way that things are, or we can embrace that change and embrace that evolution. And for people who are holding on, fantastic. Nature will continue to send messages and turn up the dial until some change is forced upon us.
Yeah, well said. I'm curious, how many people have you taught meditation to up till now, Barron? Do you have a number?
It's kind of like asking how many people you've slept with. Are you going to be impressed, or do I lie to you? Do I tell you the truth? So my goal is
I'll leave it open.
The goal in Nowra is to teach 1% of Nowra, and so the population of Nowra is 30,000, and I have surpassed that number. Of not 30,000, of 1%, of over 300 in Nowra.
Well
For
done.
me, that's just, and I think like one of the things I really want to show with this project, the Be Here Nowra project, is that there is need for this wherever you go and anywhere in the world. And to all those teachers who are living in big cities or popular places or affluent places who are struggling to find students, it's like, I've gone to this small town and I'm probably one of the busiest teachers in the world at the moment, teaching full time, and my full-time job doing this practice. And if I can do it in Nowra, like, no one has any other excuses, right? It's like there's a need for this practice everywhere. And there's towns like Nowra all over the world, everywhere. Everywhere you go, there's towns that are struggling. There's towns where people feel down and out. There's towns where people are forgotten about. And I really want to prove and show and inspire other teachers that they can go to these places and they can really make a difference. And, I think that often in this world, we think we're so small, we're so insignificant that we can't make any change in the world. And it's like, well, if you go to a place and you choose it and you just go for it, we are genuinely seeing change in Nowra. We are genuinely seeing a ripple effect. 300 people meditating has a huge effect on families, on communities, on workplaces, and those people are inspiring other people, and it's having this ripple effect. And we just had our first student who I taught in Nowra has now graduated as a teacher. And she is in the army. She's 14 years in the army, and now because Nowra has a defense department, quite a lot of the people of Nowra are employed by the army and the navy, and so she's about to come back and she's about to launch into teaching more and more people within that cohort of our town. So it's like, those kinds of things is like, that's how we see change. That's how we make change, and it starts with one person at a time. Rocking up, and it was slow at first, like one person here, a family member who felt sorry for me, like a person there that I knew from high school, And then people started to change, and it's only snowballing now. I had my busiest course. I'm actually halfway through it, which has the most people I've ever had in a single course or in that course at the moment. So, yeah, this is that effect, and it takes time. Yeah.
It does take time. And so from that phenomenal success, I would call it, because getting people interested in meditation, getting them to a place where they actually try it, and then fantastic, the student becomes the teacher. There's nothing bigger of a compliment than that. So from that to more underserved spaces like prisons, you've made that leap as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that work too? Because I find that so fascinating. How did you think about that? How did that work itself?
Yeah. So I actually haven't taught in prisons yet, but my colleague, Jo Jarvis, has. And so she founded an organization called The Light Inside. And what was really cool is that last year...
Beautiful name.
ABC... Yeah, The Light Inside, yeah. The ABC TV, which is a national broadcaster here in Australia, did a feature about Vedic meditation. And they specifically focused on people that were using Vedic meditation to transform communities. And so they focused on Nowra and the work that we're doing here. And they also focused on Jo and The Light Inside and the work that she's doing in teaching inside of prisons. And so together, that special came out last month on TV, and it's had this huge effect. Most teachers in Australia have had more students rock up because they've seen this, they've seen this inspiring story. And Jo's story is it's incredible. She moved from Australia to America. She was a journalist. She wasn't finding joy in her career anymore. She found a lot of joy in her own healing journey through meditation. And when she met with our mutual teacher, Thom Knowles, Thom asked her the question, if you could teach one cohort of people, who would it be? And immediately, the first thing she said was people in prison. And so Thom said, well, there's who you're going to teach. And so she started making headway, and she started teaching as a volunteer in Rikers Island in New York, where she was going out there to that prison, just off her own bat, just walking in and
keep going.
People.
I was just interested.
Yeah. And then since then, she's been picked up in a few prisons, particularly up in North Dakota, and she's been having a highly successful program there, not only teaching inmates, but also correctional facility staff as well, who are a really in need group as well. So yeah, Jo and I have this beautiful relationship. We were friends in New York City. We actually have a retreat together. So we do a rounding retreat in the Blue Mountains every year, which is just becoming more and more popular. But it was really cool to receive the national recognition and almost like legitimate kind of like, really legitimizing what we've both been doing through this program on ABC. And yeah, we've both had a huge kind of increase in demand for our teaching, but also like just a lot of outreach from people around the world who are saying, hey, can you come and do this in my town, or can you come and teach in this prison? So it's really exciting to be on the precipice of how this practice can continue to evolve and transform, and we need more teachers.
Yeah, we do. We need more teachers. This is pretty incredible that I feel like prisons, maybe when we first designed the system, were meant to really be rehabilitating you into a new way, a new becoming. But I think they definitely have lost their way. And so I'm really curious, like, what is that experience? Do you want to reflect on it a little bit? Are people who are inside prisons, I feel like that is the most stressful place to be. I mean, our stresses are there, but that is a system that's just, I think, designed for stress and keeping you in survival. And are people really open to learning meditation, therefore? Or do you feel that the resistance is initially like, I just want to know, what are those people like? What is the process like for them?
Yeah, I mean, from Jo's perspective, teaching inside of the prison has been the most rewarding thing she's ever done. And what she has found is that these people are really open to it because, well, they've done the research, in terms of the other ways of living and it hasn't, turned out the best for them. They also have time, they have time to meditate. They're in their cells for up to 20 hours a day. So it's like, in this way, it's like they really have the time to put towards the practice. And, Joe has been in the room with people who have murdered people or rapists or, people who have done, just unimaginable things. And these people at the core, they're all just people, right? And they've all had different upbringings. They've all had a series of events that have led them to do something that they maybe regret or don't regret. But either way, fundamentally, they're just like you and I. And when we close our eyes and when we meditate, we come back to what I said at the start about experiencing the true self. When we go down to meditate, no longer are we a murderer or a founder of a company or a podcast host. We just are. We just are that pure essence of our deep inner nature, which is at its core is consciousness. And so I think that, the reports that we're hearing from these stories inside is that people for the first time are getting to experience who they truly are. They're not thinking about the past. They're not thinking about the future. They just get to experience that present moment awareness. And what we find in this practice is the greater the kind of suffering in your life, the greater the contrast with the experience of meditation. As with you after divorce, you said you were suffering, and suffering is relative. Suffering is relative to all of us. And so when we go from deep suffering to inner peace, that contrast, the bigger that contrast, the greater the effect is going to be, the greater that feeling is going to be. And so I would say that Jo has she's so inspired, she's so motivated, she's so she's so keen to give this practice to any of the people, anyone inside who wants to learn. And the other effect has been the staff. They have absolutely loved it and they get to enjoy it. And a lot of these staff get annoyed because the prisoners and the people inside, they get given so much, right? There's so many people coming to try and rehabilitate or help or give them things, give them free stuff, give them books, whatever. But the staff are also really struggling because they have to live in this environment, which is a highly stressful environment. So the staff are enjoying getting to receive some of the practice as well.
Yeah, I think that's the really cool part about this too, that it's like you're affecting everybody that's in that system. It's not just the people in the prison, it's also the staff, which I don't know. I personally find it's probably one of the most stressful jobs to have because you're just dealing with, I guess, and especially in the American prison system, and it's just different. And there is a lot going on, and you may not have the resources. You may not be fully equipped to deal with all of that. But if you can deal with this, which is our inner self, our inside, I think all the other things can take care of themselves. So that is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I had made a mental note to speak to you about this, and I don't want to forget it. But earlier, when you were talking about, moving from New York to Nowra and creating this community, and to now these new steps on this path, was there ever a moment of doubt, especially when you were starting, when you made that mental note of like 1%? Was there moments when you questioned your path? And if you did, how did you deal with it? And I ask this because I think it's important to know like how you really dealt with the mind outside of meditation, but because self-doubt and doubting the nature, doubting the unknown is one of the greatest things that all of us, whether we're a founder, whether we're creative, whether we're just working in our jobs and trying to build a life, that doubt can be quite limiting. What is your experience about self-doubt or just doubting the magic that it will unfold or not?
Yeah, beautiful question and very, very well phrased too. I like some of the terminology that you have in that question. But I I think there's this concept in Vedic philosophy, which I'm sure you've come across. It's the idea of following charm, right? And that at our deepest level, at our core, we have this intuition and knowingness of what needs to be done. And the problem that gets in the way of following charm is our intellect. So too much thinking. And it's the thing that, it's the making the pros and the cons lists. It's the sitting down and really going, should I do this or should I not? And one of the things that we cultivate through this practice is a deep inner knowingness of which direction to move. And one of the key parts of following charm is that we don't want to be rigidly attached to a specific timing or outcome. That we get this idea in our head, I've got to teach Nowra 1% of Nowra to meditate. But we have to be very careful that we don't get so attached to that becomes everything I do. So we're constantly checking in on, is this charming? Which direction is nature moving me, and where do I have aversion? And I think, with about 6 years of meditating, by the time I had launched ready to leave New York, that my charm radar was really strong. And that I was very much moving in a direction there was barely any friction. It was all, green lights, support of nature, funding mechanisms. One of my meditation mentors reached out and just offered me $50,000 to do the project, to start the project. Just things like that continued to just happen, and it's continued to happen where I've continued to receive the support of nature. So to come back to your question, I guess some of the things that were scary is that, I was leaving New York. I was single. I was moving back in with my parents and I was a long way from any kind of potential partnership. I was letting go of a very successful company with a 6-figure salary to move back to my hometown, where that's a lot of money to be earning. And so, there was those kind of questions in the back of my mind. I put myself back career-wise, I put myself back financially, and the chances of potentially meeting someone, a lot of people in my hometown are already married with kids, particularly people from my high school. And so, there's those kinds of things that play in the back of your mind, what am I giving up here? What am I potentially losing or missing out on? But yet the charm was too strong. And there's many times when we're following charm where there's no intellect. There's no rhyme or reason. It's a pretty dumb move for my life to move from New York to Nowra. If you put it down on paper, 9 times out of 10 that you would definitely not do it. But the charm was there. And the charm was undeniable. And, I'm happy to say in hindsight, after doing this project for 3 years, that all of those doubts that I had have kind of left, in terms of, those things. I have a great partner now. We're 38 weeks pregnant. She's also a meditation teacher. We have friends who are moving here. The social scene is really blooming in Nowra, in terms of, there's people who are deciding that Nowra will be a great place for them to raise a family. So they're moving here. When it comes to the income, I'm getting enough to support myself and my family and really, provide, which is exciting. And so, I think when we lean into following charm fearlessly, there's no fear. We know, we have this deep knowingness that everything is just going to work out. And if we kind of the more that we lean into charm, the more that we lean into that fine level of feeling, that intuition, the more that nature starts to support. And I firmly believe that, and it's been reiterated, and I've been reminded of that at every single step.
Yeah, beautiful example of alignment, that you follow your intuition so you can actually just be in alignment with what nature wants and how it wants to use you for the evolution of not just yourself, but the world. And that's your sign. And I love that you said that there were signs along the way of just support coming from outside to put you on this path and to keep you there. And I think that's a big tell. I've learned personally as well, that's a big tell. When you are aligned, support comes out of nowhere to tell you that yes, it's a yes, go for it. But when it's not aligned and when you're doing something against the grain, so to speak, it may be a time to stop and pause and be like, am I pushing too hard? Is there something I'm not aligned with? And I feel like charm, which is also another word, following that deep inner knowingness is the very tool that you need to know when you're pushing against the grain, when you're going with the flow. And so thank you for sharing that wonderful, juicy part of your journey. I love to hear those parts because those are the parts that I still need to hear repeatedly as I follow my own journey. And I'd still sometimes fall in the trap of listening to that question and the mind of like, are we really going to make that leap? And the charm is like, yes, do it right now.
Yeah. It's a beautiful, and it comes with that experience of each on a daily basis, finding out that we are actually nature, experiencing that true nature and having that reminding 20 minutes twice a day. We go into our practice, we refresh that idea that, we are nature and we're carrying out the desires of nature, and we're going beyond that individuality and we're just experiencing that kind of like we get into flow, and it's beautiful. And I think that the reminder of that every single day is so important.
Yeah, amazing. So Barron, we're almost on time, but I don't want to let you go before I get my listeners to know how to know more about your several projects that sound so beautiful and such a contribution to this world. And also if somebody would like to learn Vedic meditation and if they would like to contact you, how to connect with you, tell us more.
Yeah, so I think the most exciting project for me right now is Be Here Nowra. So this is this transformational documentary that we're making about my hometown. And we're into year 3 of the project. We're into post-production of the film. So we've shot everything. We're into the scripting stage. We've got an editor who's kind of starting to cut this into scenes. And so if anybody is curious to kind of learn more about that, BeHereNowra.com or our Instagram at BeHereNowra is just a beautiful way to follow the journey. And we hope that when this film comes out, it inspires people to make change, and you'll get to see some of those stories that I mentioned earlier, those transformations. In terms of getting in contact personally, my personal website is barronhanson.com. It's got a lot of information about the different projects that I'm working on and the different things that I've kind of chosen to spend my time on or follow charm to. And, if people have questions and they want to know more, like I'm an open book. Yeah, feel free to reach out via email or Instagram or whatever your mode of communication is. I love sharing this knowledge. I love the transformation that's given me, and at this point it's just about giving back. It's about sharing it with other people and providing a space for people to learn. There's lots of great teachers everywhere all over the world. If you want to reach out, I can recommend the ones that I know personally and the ones that I've spent time with in your area. So I'm here to serve and here to answer your questions.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I am sure you'll get a lot of DMs asking for Vedic meditation teachers in the area or maybe in Australia. Right. So I would be really happy if that happens.
Joe Jarvis and I, the women who teachers in prisons, we have a retreat together in the Blue Mountains every August. And we also do a festival of Vedic meditation in Nowra, which the next one's going to be October 2026. So if any of your listeners are looking for a reason to travel to Australia, that's going to be a big kind of celebration of this practice and this wisdom. We invite all Vedic meditators and those who want to learn to come to Nowra, bring your conscious energy to the town and really kind of immerse yourself in what's going on and meet all the locals, meet all these people who have learned to meditate. It's a really cool thing. The last one we did was October 2024. So we're going to continue that in October 2026.
I might just actually come to that. Yeah, I am. You have spoken so highly of Nowra, and I've heard so much about it from even the community that I'm actually dying to see it. So you might see me and my husband there. And then, I don't know, who knows? Maybe we will not want to go back. We'll see. All right. Well, thank you
Awesome.
so
Can't
much,
wait.
Barron, for sharing your path. I think it's really, really cool that you followed your charm, your intuition, and what a great contribution and a continued contribution. And I am absolutely positive that the next time we talk, you will tell me about some other cool projects that have just contributed to some other spaces that maybe are lining up for you just in this minute that we're talking about. But thank you for letting me in on the story. It was a joy to talk to you. And many of the things that you shared today, I think I personally needed to hear too, as I'm on my journey of following charm, which I think we always are. So thank you so much for coming. And yeah, have a wonderful, beautiful day.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for sharing this. And it's a beautiful expression of this practice for you to be able to have these conversations. And it means a lot to us as teachers is that we get to share what we do. So thank you very much.
If you've ever doubted the whisper of your intuition, if you've ever felt like you were meant for something more, something sacred, more aligned with your soul, then Barron's story is a reminder that saying yes to your path will be met with support, synchronicity, and meaning. You are nature. You are the universe. And when you remember that, when you choose rest over resistance, clarity finds you. Charm, another word for intuition, leads the way. Your inner knowingness leads the way. If you'd like to learn more about Barron's work, including his upcoming documentary, Be Here Nowra, or his community retreats in Australia, or if you would like to learn how to be a Vedic meditator, you'll find all the links in the show notes. Thank you for listening. If something in this conversation moved you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs it. And if you're not already on this path of deep rest and reconnection, maybe today is the day to begin. If you'd like to contact me and let me know how you felt after hearing this beautiful story, please write to me at Divine Amuletto on Instagram or Your Colorful Path on Instagram as well. Until next time, I'll see you on Your Colorful Path. This is your host, Charu. If this episode moved something in you, please hit the follow button. Please leave a review, a star rating for us. It really matters to me to know how you feel about things. And I hope you continue to walk this colorful path with me. You can reach me anytime through Divine Amuletto, my Instagram account. That's where I share the tools, practices, and fine jewelry that supports this journey of transformation. So do check it out. Thank you for being here. Until next time, may you keep listening to the wisdom within.